Welcome to the Skeptic's Guide to Investing with Steve Davenport and Clem Miller. Every 2 weeks, Steve and Clem bring you brief investment insights you may not find anywhere else. We hope you enjoy today's episode. Here are Steve and Clem.
Hello and welcome to Skeptic's Guide to Investing. This is Steve Davenport and I'm here with Clem Miller, and in this episode we're going to talk about meta platforms, or one of the so-called Magnificent Seven. Meta recently reached 1 trillion, that's trillion with a T, market cap. Clem and I think 99% of our audience knows what Meta does, but for those 1% who don't, can you briefly describe the business, Clem?
Sure. So Meta is a social media and communications company. It has 3 major products, which many of you know about. Facebook, that was their initial product, Instagram, and WhatsApp. So those are their 3 major product lines.
So how do they make money, Clem?
So they make money off advertising. It's really that simple. I recall in a famous conversation, Mark Zuckerberg, the leader of Meta, was testifying to the U.S. Senate, and Senator Orrin Hatch asked he was confused, let's say, about what Meta does, and so he asked a question. Well, Mr. Zuckerberg, how does Meta make money? And Mark Zuckerberg tried to, without laughing too much, said, "Well, sir, we advertise. We sell advertising."
Yeah,
I thought that was funny when he said that.
Yeah, well, there's also advertising that it does for political candidates, and how it helps those political candidates can sometimes be what was implied in that question. Isn't it, Clem?
Oh, I would certainly say so. And, there's a lot of concern.
I'm not defending congressmen asking stupid questions, believe me.
There's a lot of concern in political circles about how social media, whether it's X, formerly Twitter, or Facebook, or any TikTok more recently, to the degree to which these companies, these social media companies, are able to influence political elections, and not just what somebody wears, right? So I would I think that there is some concern. These are legitimate concerns, and have led in the case of the EU to actual legislation to try to rein in some of the excesses of these companies, and so far, at least, there's been some cooperation from the social media companies with the EU, but it's early days, and there's an interesting question that arises from that, which is, how does a company like Meta adhere to some of these anti-disinformation laws coming out of Europe without at the same time violating the First Amendment? And it could be, like in so many other things, that EU legislation actually drives global behavior. And so you might actually have Meta sort of changing some of its policies in the US in terms of, allowing their platform to be misused.
So growing revenue at a fast rate is always a challenge for companies, especially when they get so large, right? And they have huge revenues. Do you think Meta will have a good 2024 revenue-wise now that it's an election year?
You stole the thunder from me, Steve. I was going to mention that they're going to do very well this election year. And not only that, but you've got the Olympics this year as well. And so that's going to be helpful for advertising. If you look at what the expectations are among analysts, they're for about 9 to 10% revenue growth
Wow.
for 2024, which is pretty strong when you consider how big Meta is already. But also that's actually down. That 9 to 10% is actually down from the 17% annualized, trailing annualized over the last 3 years, and 20% trailing annualized over the last 5 years. So the revenue growth is continuing at a nice pace, but is indeed decelerating.
Well, I think at the size it's at, I mean, I don't know how, advertising revenues and, does it vary much based on the continent or the size of the economy, or are they finding that they can make more money in advertising in areas that might not have as good a media?
Well, I think one of the things that they're doing now to try to leverage their activity is, as so many other companies are doing, is using generative artificial intelligence, and so they're starting to use that in terms of their advertising targeting.
Nice. I think many of us have heard of Mark Zuckerberg's enthusiasm regarding creating virtual reality devices, VR. Zuck called this the metaverse. He even named the company from Facebook to Meta to reflect his new emphasis. The so-called metaverse spawned 1,000 thematic investment commentaries. However, by late 2022, Zuck has dialed back his enthusiasm. You could barely hear a peep about the metaverse. Why did Zuck shift course so quickly?
It had to do with investors not believing in the metaverse. So what Meta did, what Zuckerberg did, is he pumped billions of dollars into the Reality Labs division, Meta's Reality Labs division, and as it became clear that it wouldn't generate any real commercialized products anytime soon, he would then start talking about how it could be 3 years, 5 years, 10 years before any real commercialization happened. That kind of freaked out investors who want an earlier return on larger investments. And so investors penalized Meta for that. The stock price basically collapsed in 2022. The stock market collapsed given this emphasis on Meta. I think many investors actually thought Meta was kind of a Zuckerberg vanity project, kind of like what you see with Elon Musk and his various endeavors. So they penalized Zuckerberg and Meta. However, over the last so that's changed around in 2023, and basically Meta embarked on its so-called year of efficiency. So lots of workers were laid off in 2023, and actually that's helped Meta. The fact that they decided to shift course and become more efficient over the last over the last 12 months through January 30th. Meta's share price has increased by 172%. Yeah, you heard that right. 172%. So that's investors looking at these efficiency initiatives and thinking, wow, on the back of this strong revenue growth and earnings and operating efficiency improvements, we expect Meta to do really great over the next few years.
So I'm not going to pick apart, what Zuckerberg says, because he's a lot smarter than I am because he has a lot more money. But efficiency, couldn't he have his workers do things differently or work in other areas? Is laying people off the solution for everybody who wants to have an operation that's more efficient, Clem? Sometimes that seems to me to be the easy choice versus the hard choice of actually focusing on the effort in the right areas.
I think you're right. I think that we're dealing here with Silicon Valley, and Silicon Valley has, I think, a different ethic when it comes to employment. Companies, there are more layoffs. There's more what we'll call. There's a famous economist named Schumpeter who talked about creative destruction. I think that's a great way of talking about Silicon Valley. You have companies that lay off people. You have companies that go out of business. But the individuals who are involved, who have great, engineering skills, scientific skills, they're picked up by other companies. So, it's a question of creative destruction.
So you think that Zuckerberg is trying to release that talent to other people to help the industry overall?
No, I don't think they're trying to help other industries. I think what they're doing is they're saying, in order to satisfy shareholders, which include me, by the way, who needs to be satisfied. In order to satisfy shareholders, what he's doing is he's creating a leaner, meaner company in order to do that, in order to boost up his share price.
Is shareholder price the only thing that we need to focus on, Clem, or are there stakeholders like the community and the environment and some other things that need to get some degree of attention from corporations?
Well, now we're getting into the whole ESG area. We've done a podcast on that, and I'm sure we'll do future podcasts on that. What are we talking? I mean, is it shareholders who are the key audience, or is it stakeholders beyond shareholders who are the key audience?
I'm just saying, I like them to keep you happy, Clem, because that's. But I also just wonder sometimes whether reacting by laying off people because that's what analysts recommend. It seems to me that might not always be the quid pro quo that you want to engage in.
Well, one of the things that I wanted to talk about was the Glassdoor rating for Meta. And, Meta has a 3.9 Glassdoor rating. Some of the other tech companies in Silicon Valley and beyond have ratings of, 4.0, 4.2, 4.3. So clearly, Meta's Glassdoor rating, which measures employee satisfaction, have been diminished by these layoffs. And so, one can take that into effect and say, well, as a quality proxy, and say, well, there is some dissatisfaction with this process. But, overall, what publicly traded companies try to do is they try to satisfy their shareholders.
No, I'm saying that you need to satisfy shareholders. It's where, I'm just asking whether it's, there might be some question as to whether sometimes Zuckerberg, he likes to engage in these things until there's a point at which he gets some feedback that affects his share price, that's what motivates him. So I'm fully aware. What do you think about profitability and free cash flow for these, looking ahead for Meta?
So this is a really strong company profitability wise. So net interest margin, that's the net profit divided by revenues, is 23%. And free cash flow is also 23%. So free cash flow is the amount of cash generated by a company that's available for acquisitions, that's available for buying back shares, and is available for dividends. Now, Meta does not pay dividends yet, but it does buy back a lot of its own stock. And when a company buys back stock, each remaining share of stock is worth more. And so, that's a great, another great way.
There's also issuance to management, right? So it's really the net of issuance to management minus buyback that's correct to change the total. So I know that they're trying to help but there's an employee aspect to this too, right? And management aspect.
Right. It's more of a net buyback as opposed to a gross buyback.
Right. So Meta is being challenging TikTok and Google's YouTube Shorts with its Reels product. It's also challenging Elon Musk's X with its Threads product. Given metaverse experience, do you think it's a bit of a reach to make any conclusion about Reels or Threads, or is it clear that that was a good move?
Well, I'd say it's definitely too early. It's not a gimmick. I call it a gimmick, like the metaverse, because you already have products out there that are selling, namely X and YouTube Shorts and TikTok. But
So
those
now
are
back to the skeptical panel.
yeah, but those are very well established products. TikTok, YouTube Shorts, and X, the Twitter product. So it's going to be hard for Zuck to be able to penetrate those markets and do well. So yeah, I am skeptical about the ability of Meta to break into those established markets.
The one complaint about the tech stocks tends to be that they're expensive. How does Meta look on valuation?
Pretty good. Yeah, I would. They on a forward price to earnings ratio, they're at 28%, which
28 times.
Yeah, 28 times. Sorry, yeah, 28 times forward PE. So that's not expensive as far as a tech related company is concerned. And
no,
when you,
23%.
Yeah,
profit. I mean,
when
using the PEG ratio, that's pretty good
I
number,
was going
right?
to say the PEG ratio is only 1.4 times.
Yeah.
On a forward basis. And so that's actually pretty, that indicates that it's pretty cheap too, but that's because you've got expected rapid growth still.
Yeah,
so,
that's great.
Yeah, it's not that expensive.
So I know you look at short seller interest when you're thinking about these names. How does Meta do on this short seller interest?
So pretty good. It has a short interest ratio of 1.22%. And basically what this means is that short sellers who expect a stock to go down really haven't shown much interest in looking at Meta as a stock that they might want to attack. Some of the stocks that are out there that they might want to attack have short interest ratios of 5%, 7%, 10%. When you remember what happened with those banks on the West Coast last year, they had short seller ratios before the crises of like 10%, 15, 20%, just crazy. So 1.22% is
very good.
It's pretty attractive. Yeah.
So we have a question in the mailbag, and we've kind of talked about it here, but do either or both of you invest in Meta? Can you tell us what portion of your portfolio you hold in the stock? I'll go first and say that we do hold Meta in our growth portfolio. The growth portfolio is benchmarked against the S&P growth, and that has a large percentage in technology. So our core portfolio, which has a smaller percentage in technology, we sold Facebook or Meta, but we kept it in our growth portfolio because that has a higher percentage. So when you think about if I have to only pick 12 names and they're each 2% or 2.5%, it doesn't make the cut in the top 12. But if I pick 16, 17 for the growth portfolio, it does make the cut. So I would say that we are somewhat positive, but we also have some questions about whether regulation and other items could start to be a challenge as Congress starts to imitate Europe and start to be concerned about some of the privacy and other issues with the stock. What about you, Clem?
I have about 2.5% right now in Meta of my portfolio. I have larger proportions in Microsoft and in Alphabet, which is Google. I have nothing. I sold off my Apple position recently, just by comparison. And I have never owned Tesla because I have issues which we talked about in a prior podcast. So yeah, I've got a position. I'm overall, despite some of the issues that we've talked about on the regulatory front, I do see Meta as being able to handle those issues. So I do have that significant position there. But I've got this is my portfolio. I've got a lot of positions in it, not just a growth portfolio. I've got a lot of what you would call value stocks in here. And, in a sense, 28% forward PE, 1.4% forward PEG, not necessarily purely a growth stock as some other stocks might be.
Sure. Well, I think that's a great analysis, Clem, and I appreciate all your insights. Thank you to all our listeners for checking in with us. And if you enjoyed this podcast or any of our other podcasts, please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks a lot, and look forward to talking to you again.
Thanks, Steve.
The views shared on this podcast represent the personal investment views of the hosts. They are for educational purposes and not meant to be taken as investment advice. Listeners should consult their own investment, legal, and tax advisors. Past performance of any investments is not a guarantee for future return.